Okay. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We will start a little bit gradually to allow others to enter the room. And I think we should begin with Dr. Becky Corvey, who's officially over all of this and the reason why we're doing this. Yes, Dr. Corvey. So Becky, do you want to speak and introduce folks?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. Again, welcome. We're so glad that you're with us today and assisting your own professional development and high impact practices and academic curricular growth and development. So welcome. I am Becky Corvey again, and I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and have this great opportunity to work with wonderful teams such as we have put together for you today. Jeff Gatley will be leading the webinar for us today, and he serves as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs in the University System of Georgia. He has written and edited a number of books on innovative teaching and student engagement strategies, and has served as the Scott Professor for Teaching Excellence, the Outstanding Professor for the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Louisiana at Monroe, and a Distinguished Teaching Scholar at Emory in 2009. Jeff is extremely committed and involved in his study and work with faculty, staff, and students. We welcome Dr. Shannon Brooks today. Shannon has served as the founding director of the Office of Service Learning at the University of Georgia since 2005. Here she provides leadership, support, and vision for enhancing UGA's service learning courses and community partnerships to support student learning. She also serves as an editor of UGA's Journal of Higher Education Outreach and Engagement and is a proud double dog, earning both her master's and her PhD from the University of Georgia. Dr. Ryan Brokema is the Director of Academic Transition Programs at the University of West Georgia. Within his role, he leads the faculty development efforts and the coordination of the First Year Experience Seminar and learning communities, living learning communities at the institution. We welcome Dr. Jordan Coffer as the Professor of English and Associate Provost at Georgia College and State University, where he oversees, among other things, Georgia College's high impact practices initiative, which we call GC Journeys. He is the author of The Gospel According to Flannery O'Connor, Reconsider Flannery O'Connor, and co-author of Writing the Nation. We have some excellent colleagues who will be sharing with you today, and we welcome them and look forward to interacting with you all throughout the session. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Corvey. We appreciate it. There are a lot of moving parts in this presentation, so we've asked each of the presenters to limit to about 10 minutes to leave us some time at the end to engage with you all and a couple of points along the way. So I'm a bit curious about, next slide, please, Denise. We've arranged for 2 webinars. We have offered the first one last week that focused on definitional aspects of high impact practices, the 11 high impact practices, and moving from low impact to high impact, how to enrich them. Today's webinar focuses on 3 exemplary programs within the USG. And the task here is to support your work in responding well to the new degree proposal questions that our office is sponsoring. So what I want to do first is I want to type in the chat a question and have you all respond. Let's see if I can type this question in here before we start. What are the advantages for students, faculty, and institutions in doing this HIPS work? Okay. Please type an answer in the chat box, and we'll circle to these. We'll circle back to these as we near the end of the program. Thank you. Increased engagement, better student engagement, retention. Yep. Learning. Yep. Student success rates. Trina Queen says integration of learning to real world application. I think that's vital. That's vital, particularly with Capstone, internships, service learning. So it really, these programs really do provide experience that integrates with the content of our courses. Okay, I'm going to move that to the side and continue to look at them as we go on. So next slide, please, Denise. It all began with George Q, 2008. Here's the statement that he made in this seminal book. Okay, the goal originally was 2 high impact practices, one at the beginning and perhaps one in the major. Next slide, please. This is a question from Dr. Ven's and Dr. Corvey's proposal form. And I want to urge us to consider how far we have come since 2008 as we read this. Because that question or that statement, that requirement means that more than 2 HIPS, we're focusing now on embedding HIPS in multiple degree programs, new, and I would urge also current. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? How do we support you in the USG, across the USG, and in, say, through the CETLs? One way to do this is to look at the new courses that your new degree offers, and to look at those courses as providing a way to create, define a super learning experience for students. So some of the high impact practices will accord really well with an early course. That's the first bullet. Others may align really well with a junior type course as students enter the upper division. And then the third focuses on a defining moment, a culminating moment for students, internships, capstones, some other kind of project-based course. Next slide, please. So here's in one slide, here's the idea. We're talking about embedding a high impact practice within a course with intentionality that aligns the experience, the kind of experience, with the content of that particular course. And we have a lot of choices here. We are focusing today on 4 types of HIPS, and there are others. And so we know that this is only a partial answer, but it's still I would say, a good attempt to talk about not only how to reply to the question on the degree proposal form, but how to do this well to align the HIP with the content. Next slide, please. Other resources. So in addition to webinars that we can offer and continue to offer or make post on OFD and other websites for you to use, we have multiple initiatives going on in the USG that will help. We have at each campus, I want to say the number is 4 faculty who are devoted to developing HIPs within their own courses and beyond as time goes on. These are called HIPS implementation faculty. And if that's if you're hearing this for the first time, I would say look at the second point. Robert Todd at the USG office is leading a USG high impact practices initiative, which works with these HIPS implementation faculty. Now, I'll leave it at that, but you all know Robert and you know me and you know Denise. You can send us a query and we can identify those faculty for you very easily. A third and fourth bullet is there are so many existing resources around to help integrate content, the HIP, and the learning outcomes. Leap State Georgia is an organization that does this with us. Value Rubrics is a resource available at AAC&U, and this, once this thing is submitted to you, these are live, so the links will take you to the appropriate places. And I know many of us, and Dr. Corvey may nod at this, many of us are authoring online degree proposals, online degree programs. There's a wonderful book edited by Catherine Linder called High Impact Practices in Online Education. So a number of resources for you to consult, in addition to ongoing webinars and initiatives that we offer at the USG. Next slide, please. So in 30 seconds, I want to back up and take a bird's eye view of the work that we do with the CETLs and in pedagogy. HIPS is the third blue circle at the bottom, but there are actually 4 contexts within which faculty work to develop learning experiences for students. And they begin with course design, they move to in-class strategies. A lot of the work of the Chancellor's Learning Scholars focuses on how to be more engaging, active learning, inclusive, transparent. Delivery in class is, to me, is just as powerful and that engagement as the out-of-class experiential, particularly when the in-class leads to the out-of-class experience. And then the fourth, of course, is assessment, and we have multiple ways of assessing that. Next slide, please. And so this, I will not spend any time. This is a different representation of what the blue circles just represented for you. Okay. We have 3 examples of HIPs across the USG, and I'm going to have these in place. Exemplary HIP Service Learning at UGA Shannon Brooks, HIPs in the First Year Seminar, West Georgia, Ryan Bronkema, and Embedding High Impact Practices into New Degrees, Jordan Kofer. So I'll turn things over to Shannon, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to share some of what we're doing at the University of Georgia to promote service learning opportunities for students. If you want to go to the next slide. Just to set the context, I wanted to make sure that you all understand kind of where we are with service learning at the University of Georgia. One of our goals is to make this an accessible form of experiential learning at UGA. And so we, in 2016, started a experiential learning graduation requirement, and a core part of that is focused around high impact practices. And our goal is that students on campus can bump into service learning courses throughout various programs of study. We offer these courses in all 17 schools and colleges, and the Office of Service Learning works to help develop these courses, promote faculty development. We do research and assessment, and as well as development of community partnerships. And so today I'm really going to focus on sort of 2 key elements, some of the work we do with course design and faculty development, and how that can help your thinking around these program designs that you're developing. and also some of the assessment that happens. Next slide, please. So this is a foundational definition of service learning. I know for some of you this is familiar. This is what we use in all of our service learning faculty development. And there are many definitions of this, variations of this definition in the literature. But if you go to the next slide, this really forms the basis of what we talk about in terms of essential and core elements of high quality service learning. This figure breaks down these key elements, and I'm not going to go into much depth here because of time. It's really a whole other training. However, there are a couple of key elements I want to emphasize today as you are thinking about your program proposals, because they are really vital and foundational to well-designed, high-quality service learning experiences. And I think they should be at the core of developing any new service learning courses or thinking strategically about where service learning should be positioned in the curriculum and based on its strengths as a HIP. All of these are important, but the ones on the right are the ones we're going to focus on today. So number 2, service plus learning outcomes. I'm going to go into a bit more depth about service learning outcomes later in this presentation. However, the basic principle here is that in a high quality service learning course, it's important that the service activity or community-based learning activity is connected to learning outcomes. Otherwise, it's a nice volunteer activity to have, and it may have benefits for students, but it's disconnected from the learning that's happening in the course. And this can really frequently have questions of students questioning the value and the relevance of the experience when it's not thoughtfully considered. Number 3 is community need. And this is best practice in service learning pedagogy is that the service activity should meet a real world community need to further the common good. And this is, I think, a key consideration when you're strategically thinking about where service learning fits and can be most impactful for student learning in the curriculum. And so I would advise you to look for content areas where you can naturally make these connections to community needs and create projects or placements that provide meaningful and relevant service activities. I think for us in the USG, this is actually a great opportunity to think about course and how course and content areas can respond to issues facing the state of Georgia. And that could be, it runs the gamut, affordable housing, literacy, workforce development, food and water issues, post-secondary access. You can go so many different directions with this. And so linking to these needs creates that relevance and ability to apply what students are learning in the classroom. And then finally, reflection. I want to emphasize that in a well-designed service learning course, there should always be structure, time, and activities for students to make the connection between the community-based learning and the service activity to the learning outcomes. And again, we do entire workshops on effective reflection, but it's really one of the most essential elements for successful service learning. And it's also a great way to think about doing for direct assessment. Reflective activities are excellent direct assessment methods. Things like writing prompts, portfolios, visual reflections, presentations. Really, reflective activities can be built into almost all learning and assessment activities. Next slide, please. To delve more deeply into the important elements of service learning, there's a resource that we offer. You're welcome to link to and view this video that has more information about the key elements of service learning. This is also a great one to use for students to introduce them to the concept. This is available on our website. Next slide, please. So as you're thinking about program proposals involving HIPs, it's helpful to know what student learning outcomes are frequently assessed in service learning courses. And there are a number of dimensions that are frequently mentioned in literature. And the ones that we do institutional assessment on at UGA focus primarily on 3 dimensions: civic, professional, and academic learning. And there are many other areas as well, like personal values, cross-cultural learning that may be important as well. The assessment survey linked here is the indirect measure that we use for all S courses, which is how we identify service learning courses at UGA. It's freely available on our website under faculty resources, and we invite you to use it and adapt as needed. I'm also going to briefly, on the next 2 slides, pull out some examples from our academic and professional items on this survey so you can see the kinds of learning outcomes we're assessing in our courses, just to get your thinking going around ways that you might craft learning outcomes for service learning courses in a program proposal. Next slide. So here are some selected examples from, can you go back 1 slide, Jeff or Denise? Thank you. Here are some selected examples from academic learning outcomes. So things like understanding better the subject matter of the course, or positively influencing my intention to complete my degree. In addition, we also learn a great deal from what students say about the impact of service learning in some of the free responses. And I like what this student says about clarifying the abstract academic material, making things relevant, as we've been talking about in this idea of connecting the community to learning. Next slide. And some of our professional skill development items could be things like, even clarifying what major or profession I want to enter, leadership skills, working in teams, problem solving and critical thinking skills, communication skills, all of these things that we know from conversations with employers that these are important skills that our graduates have. Next slide. Here are some other outcomes that we look at institutionally at the University of Georgia. Things like, and I think someone mentioned this about retention. Our data show that service learning has a positive impact on retention and graduation. We also have done a lot of research internally about employment, and we find students who take a service learning course start at higher salaries and have a quicker time to promotion than those students who do not. Next slide. You can skip that one. All right, so this is the course design. I would like to just leave you all with some resources that we use frequently on our campus. In particular, for those of you who are developing some of the program proposals and perhaps you needed a little bit more of a primer on service learning, this book by Barbara Jacoby, Service Learning Essentials, is excellent, and it has a really good overview of a lot of what I've discussed today. And I will drop some of these links in the chat when I'm finished with my presentation. Next slide, please. I want to just leave you all with the last word from our students. I've been talking about essential elements for effective service learning, and they are obviously our most essential element. So if I can be a resource to any of you, please let me know, but thank you so much for your time.
Excellent. So thank you so much, Shannon. So my name again is Ryan Bronkema. I work with the first year seminar program here at the University of West Georgia. And for some of you that don't have agency over first year seminar, this might be easiest to think about courses that are early in your curriculum. So anything that you would want to onboard a student into, I think helps set a framework to sort of what we're about to talk about. So next slide, please. So just as a background of what our first year seminar course looks like, it's an academic, interdisciplinary, topic-focused first year seminar, which is a full sentence to say, but the short version is our faculty members design their own courses, which is great for the faculty, it's great for the students, but you could probably infer that there's some consistency that we would want to work with. And this presentation will address some of those strategies. Our course is worth 2 credits. It fits within core area B2, which is institutional priorities within the USG. And because our course has so much flexibility, include formal connections to critical academic skill building. So things that we think every student should get, we bake those right into the courses for them. We heavily utilize faculty in our courses to sort of make sure students get exposed to faculty earlier. And our courses are capped at 22 students at this point. So next slide, please. There we go. So here are our course learning outcomes. In brief, I just want to sort of have these as a frame, but we assess written and oral communication, a very long-winded way of saying information literacy, and then lifelong and active learning. So curiosity and things associated with curiosity and active learning. So next slide, please. So this is where I think what we do might have benefit to any type of degree program or sort of any program that you're trying to work students in. So because our courses are uniquely designed, we quickly realized that there were some things that every student should get exposed to that we would want to provide with some consistency. And some of this was inspired parallel to the USG work around momentum year and now sort of momentum approach. But the 4 things that we bake into every first year seminar course that we have are career reflection, academic skill building, academic planning, and growth mindset. And these are all facilitated centrally out of my office. So this fall, for example, we have 57 sections of our course, and my office facilitates all of the content as it relates to these 4 units to make sure that our students are getting consistent material. And then we get all the assessment data centrally, which has its own advantages for a separate presentation. So next slide, please. So here are the partnerships that we are able to strengthen and or sort of build better bridges with. And the nice thing is all of these, some of these are cross-divisional, which is kind of a nice move. So each of our students that take our course complete the U Science Career Inventory. Some of you may have heard of it because it's pretty popular in Atlanta K-12 schools. And I think there's a pretty good cross-section of students that are exposed to it there. But our students take the U Science Career Reflection, and then they do a moderated reflection at the end. I think Shannon hit it right on the head that the key to service learning is reflection. I think the key to any of these skill building pieces is to end with a reflection of some kind. And that's probably a universal trait, but we definitely try to work that in. The second thing we ask all of our students to do is to engage with our academic support services. So that includes academic coaching, tutoring, supplemental instruction, or writing support. And those are all facilitated by our Center for Academic Success. The third requirement is that students review the registration process, get familiarized with DegreeWorks, and then sort of engage with their program map, even if it's just to know where to find it or that there's a program map that exists. It helps students who are early on in their programs understand that advising is not just semester to semester, but it's year to year and it's a multi-year program. So that sort of helps them get a vision for what they might be entering into. And the earlier we can do that, the better. So that's a good thing. The last piece that's sort of adjacent to all of this is that we provide faculty development for everybody that teaches with us to make sure that they understand all of these components and that they can be good advocates of these components within their courses, because it doesn't help for us to facilitate great workshops if the faculty aren't able to understand and communicate that with their students. So we want to make sure that faculty are equipped to be good allies for us and with us around the faculty development or around these sort of co-curricular pieces that we've baked into our course. So next slide, please. Perfect. So looking back to the outcomes that I started with, our career assessment encourages students to apply lessons about their skills, strengths, abilities, and sort of Holland codes to think about how it fits their future plans and thinking about the purpose in which they're pursuing a degree at the University of West Georgia. I think getting students to think about the logical reason they're in the space with us early helps them perhaps redirect into something that is more meaningful to them and or more explicitly describe why they're with us. And we care about that a good deal. The other outcomes we're looking at, so the lifelong learning outcome, the academic skill building piece involves some mindset work, it involves some academic planning, it involves a lot of things that are sort of beneficial to students throughout whatever program that they're in. And we incentivize faculty members who sort of dabble with research in the first semester. It doesn't happen a ton and it's not a requirement, but if they do so and they present with their students, we incentivize that work by helping sort of fund poster development, or if they're looking for funds for that, we have little scholarships, that type of thing. So we like to incentivize that other people are engaging in additional high impact practices that might be of benefit to the students in their class. So next slide, please. So this is probably the most applicable thing that we do that I think could be done across any degree program. Even when I taught in the master's degree program, full-time. I think all of these component parts made a lot of sense for what we were doing then. So I think it applies a lot of ways. But we do career readiness in sort of a 3-step process now. One, in that we go into the classes with the students early to sort of prepare them with the purpose of why we're having them do it. If you're familiar with TILT, this whole setup is built around TILT. We want to describe to them the purpose of why we're having them do it, and the purpose of why reflecting about your purpose and sort of what college does to sort of help your career early is important. So the sooner you start to think about what degree you're in and whether it's a good fit, the better, even if it's just to affirm the fact that you made a good choice. So we want to engage students in that process early. So we visit a course once and have a 50-minute sort of preamble presentation that introduces them to the idea, how to use the software, and sort of how to prepare to take the assessment. The students take the assessment at home because it takes focus and you really have to sort of be in a silent place. And then we follow up in partnership with Career Services to help them make meaning of the results. And then they use those results to complete a reflection that we submit for general education review. So that's our common assessment that goes into general education assessment. So that sort of 3-phase plan really gets students thinking about career readiness. So next slide, please. So some things that I would suggest if for anybody, or that any of these, that what we're doing might be of benefit for folks, is I think that building purposeful ways to require students to reflect on their career path early and often are critical. Like if those types of things can be built into the program to help students understand either what nuanced track they might want to pursue within a degree, or whether or not this degree is a good fit for them early, I think is good. Getting students to sort of make sense of their experience all the time as it relates to what it could mean to them long-term. I would also say incentivizing and systematizing skills or experiences that are required for a student to be successful. If a student in a program needs to be a good researcher or writer or analytical thinker, building those things into the curriculum rather than assuming they're either going to happen or just going to naturally occur, building those types of things into the curriculum, I think, is of great meaning and sort of adds consistency to what students are getting. The piece that I did not write down in here is that I think anytime you can link courses in a way that would mimic learning communities, it seems to be, at least based on our findings, it seems to be even more beneficial for students as far as a community builder and sort of making connections. So linking courses a la learning communities has benefit across really any age bracket or developmental level of a student. I think those types of things are good. The last piece I would say here is anything that you do on purpose, it's important to do faculty development to prepare your faculty members to represent those purposeful moves. In our case, it's helping them represent our career work, our advising work, and our skill development and mindset work in a way that is meaningful to them and to the students, so that we were all sort of working in the same direction. I think that type of collaborative work is a benefit both to the faculty involved and to the students involved. So that's what we have to offer, and I'm happy to answer questions when we get to the end. So thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. So I was asked to talk about the high impact practices that are toward the end of a program development. So whenever you're embedding high impact practices into a program, I really wanted to just focus today on internships and capstones and sort of developing those as high impact practices. At Georgia College, we have a program called GC Journeys. And what we have done is we ask all of our students to complete 5 high impact practices during their 4 years. And so we've embedded high impact practices into the curriculum. So no matter what degree program they're enrolling in, they'll do a first year experience, they'll do career planning, and then they'll also do capstones. And then we ask them to choose 2 more during their time. Next slide, please. Another part of the GC Journeys program is that we've also embedded the AAC and U Essential Learning Outcomes, or we call them essential skills, into the core curriculum. So these courses also carry a skill with them, teamwork, written communication, critical thinking, and we do a lot of training around those skills. Next slide. And and I just wanted to mention this really quick. We only do that because we know, in terms of labor market, these are the types of skills that employers are asking for, especially with hiring managers. Next slide. So I'll talk about capstones as a high impact practice and internships. And so at Georgia College, we make sure, especially when a new program comes about, in terms of curriculum development, that each degree program has a capstone and ends with a capstone. As Jeff mentioned, Jeff quoted George Koo earlier, and said, all students should do such work and be prepared to navigate the post-college world of complex and unscripted problems. And that's sort of the idea of a capstone. Regardless of the degree program, it should be this culminating project. It could be a performance, but something that brings all the elements of the degree program together as this kind of final academic experience. Next slide, please. And so we've got these elements of a high impact capstone, and we share these with faculty. We do a lot of faculty development around GC Journeys and around our high impact practices. We even have like a summer class. So if you're leading a capstone or you're leading an internship, you can take this summer class and work on developing a high impact practice course or curricular experience. But one of the things is, whenever you're offering a capstone course, is trying to have it scaffolded, so that there's courses, the courses appropriately lead up to a capstone course. So at Georgia College, a good example is our econ program. All students have to take econometrics in econ before they take their capstone, and then they take the project they were working on in econometrics and they continue on that project. Our math program does something very similar, where it's essentially a 2-semester capstone course, and then they do presentations at the end. All students are required to synthesize and apply what they've learned. There should be a lot of faculty guidance and feedback. A lot of people have both Ryan and Shannon have mentioned this, with, I think, all high impact practices. There should be that reflective piece, but there also should be a lot of feedback. So these are elements of capstone as well as first year experience or service learning, and get something they have in common. Next slide, please. So I think, some of the tips, if you're developing a program and you're thinking about the capstone, is making sure, early on in the capstone, there's a lot of communication about the steps that it's going to appear. We're working with our environmental science folks, and, they're working on a capstone redesign that's interesting, because, they're kind of splitting out field-based research and then other topics along. So, you have some students who kind of want to go a grad school path, and then some that aren't, and that's possible in their capstone. So I thought that was really cool, and they're going to be able to communicate that ahead of time, and students sort of know going in, that they have this communication, but then they also have the project defined ahead of time. Appropriate supplemental activities in the capstone. So even though it should really revolve around some sort of major culminating piece of the degree program, you may want to think about scaffolded activities leading up. So it's not just one major paper or one performance. And in our theater department, their capstones, they do a lot of small assignments that lead up to this final performance. And then research shows that students who do a capstone, they gain more versus their peers who don't do a capstone that at least has a final product or performance associated with it. I've seen that there's classes that just kind of are an end of a degree program, and they're called a capstone, but they don't really follow these best practices around making it high impact. So there should be some sort of final project or presentations at the end, something that I think helps make it stand out and makes it serve as high impact. Next slide. I just wanted to show you all really quick for what we're doing. We have a program assessment, and we ask our students to, we were doing some assessment on each of the high impact practices at Georgia College, and of the 3 embedded that all students do, Capstones was the strongest of that, which I think is pretty clear. 85% of our respondents felt like they were adequately challenged and that our capstone met the learning outcomes. So, we were really happy with that. Next slide. Along the same lines, whenever you're thinking about work-based learning as a high impact practice, or whether it's like internships, whether it's co-ops, whether it's a practicum, these are something else where it's really kind of that learning by doing. You want to make sure that students have a supervisor on site, and students also have the ability to reflect on the learning that's happening during that internship. So it should be more than just student goes and does a job. There should be that reflective piece. Next slide. So the elements that we've set up or we defined that would make a high impact internship is that it's an extension of the classroom, that they're putting their learning and their theory to use, that it could be transferable. So it's got to make sense whenever a student proposes an internship, for the degree program, but we also are looking at making sure that it's transferable. Define beginning and end seems obvious, but they do have to have these learning objectives and professional goals. And I think number 5 is really important, that you have the supervision with a professional, that you have routine feedback, both from the supervisor as well as getting feedback from the faculty member. Next slide. And this is our final slide. The thing we found is that out of our optional high impact practices that are part of Journeys, internships is the most popular. There's a lot of literature out about how much internships can lead to jobs and how impactful they are. So Jeff had already mentioned this. A lot of people mention when they talk about high impact practices, when done well, they can really be beneficial. An internship is I think the benefits are obvious, and so we've noticed that on campus, and we've seen that it's been challenging for students and also meeting the learning outcomes. And that's it for me.
Wow. That's a lot of information from all of y'all. Shannon, Ryan, Jordan, thank you. And so before we turn off the PowerPoint and just open it up, we want to see your faces, and we have a prompt, but we really want to field your questions for any of the panelists. But last slide here, before saying thanks in the PowerPoint here, just one part of the degree proposal process asks for some thought and some language on the alignment. I think it's 37, 38, 39. Dr. Corby, you can tell me exactly which one it is. But the career competencies, the high impact practice outcomes that Shannon and Ryan and Jordan have been talking about really are almost the same language when I started looking at the NACE 8 competencies. So what your student learning outcomes are or will be in these degree proposals can join a really nice home of 2 different sources, 2 different kinds of learning outcomes that are well defined. Okay. And then the last slide before I just type into the prompt, thank you. This is the butterfly effect. I think that's what we're talking about. A little bit can have a lot of effects as time goes on. All right, I want to return to the chat and then stop sharing the screen if we can, and then ask you all, I'm assuming that many of you are well versed in high impact practices. I see David Newton, I see a lot of friends here, and I think others who have the responsibility of authoring or facilitating this degree proposal process may have a bit of cognitive dissonance because there's a lot of information, a lot of choices to be made. So my question is, what challenges do you foresee and what needs do you have, I should say anticipate, in, let's say, institutionalizing HIPS at scale? That's a long word. Give me a chance to do it. Institutionalizing. Okay, so there's my question. Yes. All right, let's maybe think a minute, and then you can type a thought, a question, a challenge, or ask of anyone in the room a question about service learning, first year experience, internships, capstones, or perhaps the degree proposal process. Dr. Corvey is here, and she's been fielding scores of these proposals over the past, since last October, I think we began to do this. Faculty time, absolutely. Faculty buy-in. I think all of you mentioned, all of the presenters mentioned faculty training, faculty pushback, class size. No one has mentioned resources yet. When I was going over this in my mind at breakfast this morning, I said, UGA has these resources and West Georgia is different, but has really put a lot into this particular high impact practice. And Journeys has this like self-defining curriculum. So what are we to do at many other institutions who have either focused or not, selected or not? What are the challenges of resources that you have? There you go. That's it. That's it. Robert? Okay. All right. Does anyone want to unmute and offer one of these questions aloud so we can all contemplate it, or should we just keep reading and scrolling? We have about 10 minutes, maybe 8 minutes, something like that. And I think most of us will be able to stay. I know Denise and I tend to stay after we close out to handle other questions that you may have that you don't feel comfortable asking in the general group. Will the USG be required? Okay, Trina, I see you unmuting. Do you have a question?
I did. We talked a little bit at the end of the last class, but I thought it was important to bring it up here. Identifying what activities you need to complete, or what things have to be done, how many of those things you have to meet for a course to be considered, or an activity to be considered a HIP. I think there's a lack of continuity across USG.
Yeah. I don't have a number, except I know that I've taught for 30 years, and I know each time I offer a literary studies course, I tend to add another thing, and then so I integrate, and I don't think there's really a tipping point for it to be like judged. I know that we have the 11 HIPs that have been studied and researched and accepted as evidentiary programs. I don't know how to answer that with a number, except to say with faculty who are considering, when they see the results of the way things are done in UGA service learning department or unit, and they say, wow, students go off, they provide a service, but they're also integrating the content of a biology course or a literary studies course. That's when you can taste success. I'll say that's the easiest way. Someone else in the room may be able to answer that better than I can.
Well, I think one of the misunderstandings is it seems like administration is looking for something bigger, and they don't realize that a lot of the things that we are already incorporating in our courses is a HIPS activity. And sometimes that, like, for example, discussion questions, right? So in some courses, discussion questions might not be a HIP activity,
Right.
but in my particular course, I teach science, technology, and society through a medical ethics lens. So if I ask the students about euthanasia or the right to die, I mean, to me, that qualifies as a HIP.
Okay. I'm a convert. We talked last time. I get it. I know that there are lots of things out there that aren't on the AAC and U list. I totally get it. I agree. Other questions? I think David Newton. David, do you want to unmute and ask that aloud, or do you want me to read it? He may want me to read it. I think that means read it.
Hey,
Okay.
Jeff. Yeah, my just question was, and this is, you know, the asking new degree programs to kind of, you know, describe and identify what they are, you know, how they're going to embed HIPs into them. And I assume some of that will be through the use of these new attributes that are being developed through the University System of Georgia. They'll be able to identify courses that have specific HIPs attributes with them. My question was, and you may not know this, maybe someone does, is a similar process going to be done for existing degree programs? In other words, is there going to be a review of degree programs so that that they would also be able to, you know, report on what their HIPs are? I know we're going to get that question from faculty leadership, and just wanted to be able to respond to it.
That's a great question, and I don't have an answer. That's above my pay grade. My job is to make good things happen. And so I think it would be great. I'll say it this way, David. As existing programs enrich their offerings with or by integrating, embedding HIPs into their courses, very good things will happen. I know that. I've seen it for many, many years. As far as like requiring it, that's going to be a vision statement or a direction that Dr. Dinley or perhaps the chancellor would have to decide upon. This focus here is new degree proposals, and I see that as like a really good way in to enriching new degree proposals, new degree programs. I would love for this to happen all the way through. I think it already is at West Georgia, University of Georgia, and many other institutions. And I think establishing HIPS representation at each campus, enlarging upon the number of people who are practicing HIPS, you know, or including HIPS in their courses. To me, that's the organic way to grow this. If there's a larger imperative, we'll see. I guess we'll see. Great question.
It is a great question. At this point, the Academic Affairs Unit is looking toward new programs and forward. We're not asking that you go back and redesign courses. A couple places where you may choose to do that and to implement more HIPs into your courses would be that we do ask each institution to do an academic comprehensive review each year. And in that review, the provost's office reports on the success of recently added programs in terms of, are you meeting your enrollment projections? What is the graduation rate and so forth? If you had a program that was on the border of being successful that had been implemented a few years back, what you might suggest through the provost's office would be the team who manages that course will review each course for HIPS embedded initiatives or will strengthen courses in that particular program as a strategy to perhaps help that program become more successful in the number of graduates. But you will not be asked to go backwards and implement into all your programs and report to us on that.
I think that's wise. Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Other questions and observations. I see the emphasis upon research, not improving teaching, probably at an R1 or so, where your primary role is producing new knowledge. That's been something for 10 years at Emory. That was a kind of balancing act that we had to do. Those of us in faculty development at the Teaching Center at Oxford College, for example, and Emory College is CFDE. It's always a kind of balancing act. And I think good research leads to good teaching, at least potentially. And I think the focus on producing new knowledge leads to really cool undergraduate research projects with your students. So at R1s, you may have a different kind of student body that are like ready for this disciplinary knowledge. So opening the door to sharing the processes of knowledge creation in the lab processes. That kind of thing is a way to bring HIPs. So it's not like they're separate. It's a way to integrate these to where they are integrated, I think. That's not a complete answer. There's always tension between the different duties that we shoulder.
And Doug's question at Kennesaw, hi Doug, is that will the USG require or what will we require from institutions in annual reviews of promotion and tenure? That is a very timely question. Right now, promotion and tenure and post-tenure review are being reviewed at the USG system. And there is a group working on that. Some institutions are asking and implementing teaching that would include high impact practice as a criteria for measurement of faculty success. All of those initiatives, I feel certain, would travel through your individual institutional faculty boards of governance before any of those were initiated. I don't see that you would have the USG insisting that that now be a unique criteria as part of evaluation, but it would be a strategy used in effective teaching.
I know we have some important folks in the audience. I'm looking at the chat here, and I know that I mentioned Robert Todd and a HIPS initiative. Robert, if you want to unmute and describe the CAD effort or the next year of the HIPS support on each campus, that would be great.
Let's see if my audio and video is working. Is it?
Yeah.
All right. I'll do it very quickly because we're at time, but the course attribute dashboard coming this fall. No one is expected to provide any data until spring because we're going to do a lot of training and socialization this fall. Course attribute dashboard will allow us to show HIPs and also low cost, no cost textbooks and other attributes for courses. Give us a great deal of power going forward to see where we've been, where we're going, and how we present ourselves, both to ourselves to see how we've made progress and also to the rest of the world at large. The HIPS implementation faculty, yes, we will have 4 in each institution going forward for the next academic year. Those invitations are going out to the provost to make those selections at the end of next week. And hopefully we'll have most of those folks who have done incredible work during the last semester coming back and working with us to push HIPS implementation further over the next academic year.
Right. All right. Thank you. That, in short, all the units across the institutions are including HIPS. And unlike how I feel after a third set of tennis, I really think HIPS are here to stay. Mine maybe not, but these HIPS are here to stay. So we just want to thank you and note that these 2 webinars may be posted on Dr. Corvey's site or Office of Faculty Development site. We'll make sure that Dr. Venn puts out the news on where they're located. And I wanted to ask about your needs so we'll know what to fashion, if any, webinars in the fall regarding faculty development and program proposals. So again, thank you so much for listening and contributing, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Okay. We will probably stay a little bit for those of you who have further questions.
Thank you.